Okay, thank you very much for this lovely welcome. I hope you don't mind if I stay sitting, if I remain sitting. Yes, okay. Thank you for this opportunity to speak here and to show me the university. Bill has shown me it around, and it's a really lovely place. And I've met many people already, and they are all so nice. So thank you for this welcome and for the opportunity. As I said, as Bill said, I'm from the Czech Republic, working for this business newspaper. It's a weekly, which is circulation about, which is very low for your ears, but it's circulation 10,000. But for the Czech Republic, which has the population of 10 million people, weekly circulation is between 10 and let's say 50,000 for national newspapers. The biggest newspaper daily has circulation about 300 copies. So I want to say it's like fairly influential business weekly, especially for the Prague and business community. Before that, I worked for Prague Business Journal, another business weekly, and also for Transitions Online, which is a server in English, which it's also a weekly online magazine which covers transitional countries. I gave you some handouts printed out from this Transitions Online, so you can see one of my stories and also some other stories published on this online. It's a very good source of information about Eastern Europe and also some Asian countries. If you are interested in transitional countries, politics, economy, visit this server because it's really very useful source of information. I'm going to talk a little bit. I'd like to do a little introduction about the Czech media, but afterwards I really beg you to participate in discussion and to make this meeting a bit interactive, because honestly I think you might have interesting questions. Also, there is another Czech girl here in the room, and she's Monika. She studies here sociology and media, and yeah, I'd like to include her in the discussion if you want to ask something about the Czech Republic, Prague, about the culture, anything apart from media. So, as you probably know, the communism ceased in the Czech Republic, I mean former Czechoslovakia, in 1989, since about 16 years ago. Since then, the media has developed freely, I would say. But as you can see, there was like 16 years, the only time when the media had a chance to develop under free conditions. Before that, under communism, all newspapers, TV stations, radio stations, they were like PR agencies for Communist Party. There was no free press. There were some stories like features about human interest stories, but the real reporting was done in favor of the Communist Party. When I was 17, when the communism fell, so I really remember this. And I have to say that all journalists in that time were like PR agents for the Communist Party. At this point, the media is free. And I gave you some handouts provided by an NGO which monitors media. And it says, it's called Freedom House. And it says that in the Czech Republic, media are free. The press is democratic, comparable to other democratic countries. But I would argue that this is not exactly true. Just because they've been only 16 years for developing the media culture, which is not as it should be, and as in other Western European democracies, and it's much different from what is in the United States. I would probably just say a few points in which it's different from media in here. First of all, the editorial policy is not as developed as here or as in Western democratic countries, because I'd like to give an example. There is a story written in one of the mainstream Czech medium newspapers. There was a guy who did reporting about some conflict in Iraq, and he said in his story, the dateline was that he was based at the place and did live reporting. It was not true. He was sitting in Prague's office, doing the reporting, checking wire news, and published it as a real story from the place, from the spot. Some other reporter from competitive media learned this and wanted to write a story, but they forbid him from doing this story because it was like not loyal enough. So this server, which is like in English, and it's a non-profit online magazine, found a person who did a story about it. And when this story came out, the editors would, in this mainstream medium, the daily newspaper, they would really support this reporter. They wouldn't admit it was a mistake. They just try to make excuses. And the point is that and other media wouldn't pick up the story, just because it was not really fair to this main medium to say something bad about it. And the point is that the culture is not there yet. The editors, instead of like sucking this reporter, as it would happen here in the United States, as it happened several times, like the New York Times reporter, the James, how is his name? Yeah, they would suck him, and he won't be able to find a job anywhere else. But in here, this guy, he still keeps his job. He works there, and that's that's not fair to readers, isn't it? So that's one of these like media culture problems which is not developed enough. Then the ownership. Most media are owned by private corporations, which obviously make the media cash cows for these private companies. There was Radio Free Europe and BBC till Radio Free Europe stopped reporting about the Czech Republic last year or 2 years ago. BBC just stopped reporting about a month ago, and it's a big deal for the media market now, because the BBC had the best broadcasting, news-oriented. They were interesting stories. I used to listen it every morning. And since then, there is no such a medium really to cover business, and I speak maybe about the radio station, but there are no radio stations which would replace this BBC. So you see, BBC left because we are already democratic and free press, but on the other hand, left this place without any other better medium, and there is no other people no other like watchdogs, to check the situation there. So because we are already free, nobody pays attention anymore. The ownership about the Czech, there is, like, as I said in one of my stories and handouts which you have, the daily newspapers, about 60% or up to 80% are owned by German companies, which use different ethical standards in the Czech Republic than they would use in Germany. Because Germany is more developed, they wouldn't really, they don't apply the same rules as they do in Germany in the Czech Republic, including the wall between advertising and news departments. There is wall which is pretending to be, but there is in real life there is no wall, because there are a lot of the penetration of PR stories is really high in Czech press, and there is a kind of fair cooperation between editors and the advertising department. I don't know, in here, how is it here? I think it's completely separated, isn't it?
It's supposed to be. It's supposed to be that I've seen some smaller papers here where it's not. You see a lot of PR working in that it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
It's more difficult in smaller towns and communities because the advertisers really are the absolute lifeblood. There are very few of them. And there's also the phenomenon of advertorials, which, even I had a friend who resigned from the Herald Tribune because of their policy of advertorials.
I see.
That was 20 years ago.
So anyway, but you still have some sort of notion that it shouldn't, that it's not right. Yes. And you have instruments, but in my country, there is no notion. For example, the media culture is not developed. This is my point. Like, we are free, but the culture is not there yet. So despite the fact that we are free and the media is free, the quality is not comparable to other Western democracies. For example, reporters, it's very common for Czech reporters to go for free trips and write stories about it, especially about tourism sectors. Even in business, it happened even in my paper that a reporter went for a free trip before I was in this post, and just wrote a story, It's not, and it happens. I don't know, does it happen here as well? I think it does. Is it very common? Because I learned that, according to my people in here, they would say that it's not very common.
It's against our code. It's against our, Society of Professional Journalists and various other organizations have a code of ethics that would say you don't do it. Some organizations corporately even have in-house rules that you aren't supposed to do these days, but obviously
But it's pretty common.
Yeah.
It's pretty common.
But in the
Is
top,
it pretty common?
in the
Okay,
top
so
50 or 60 circulation newspapers is much less common. At the Tribune, even a freelance writer had to sign a thing saying they were not taking free trips, they were not taking free hotels, and if they found out they were in any way, they would never ever be able to write for them, even freelance again.
that's interesting to hear. But anyway, for example, government trips, it's very common for mainstream media to go with the government for free and just write stories about it. I learned that it's not very common here with the, like president or prime minister. Apart from that, there is for example, the mainstream medium, Daily Mladá Fronta Dnes, you know this one. For example, editors, they have a list of companies, including many German international retailers, like many German retailers which are penetrating into our country, and they are not allowed to write about them or to write negative stories because they advertise a lot. There is a huge penetration of like German companies into our country, building shopping centers and so on. It's a good thing, I'm not complaining, but the media is not ready for this pressure, for this like economic pressure from this corporation's influence. The media don't know how to deal with it. Or maybe they pretend to know, but I mean, editors, as I said, I have friends working in Daily Mladá Fronta Dnes, which is the name of that, and they have a list, and they can't write stories about the biggest advertisers. And the problem is in here, I don't know, maybe it can happen here, but people would definitely oppose. But in my country, they take it as a normal thing. So that's another thing. Also, PR stories. PR agencies in my country, they work similarly to the United States. But what is not similar is that they sometimes write stories, and the stories are published under name of reporters. It happened to me. I know friends who had stories published and they never wrote them. It was my experience. I did a profile of one businessman, and I wanted to get his CV from the PR person, and she would tell me, oh, don't worry, I just write the story and you'll get your job done. And I didn't accept it, but it's not daily practice, but it happens. And nobody really opposes it extremely, I would say, as it would happen here. And the person would be, the reporter would be completely lost for a future career. But in my country, it's not that. So, yeah, and last point is probably that, as I said, the penetration of businesses like corporations coming to the country is really high now. And there are like a lot of investors and a lot of money flowing in. And when the money is flowing in, that's hard to resist, not to accept big advertisers, to write negative stories. There is a huge pressure from this business sector and from these corporations. I'd like you to, do you have any questions which would, because I said the main points, about how the Czech press function. I'm just wondering whether, is there anything, or you can ask about the country or the capital. Or.
What's the American influence on Czech media at this point?
Minimal. There is almost no influence. I just want to tell you, there is like this business paper which follows the American style. We are far from perfect, that's why I'm here, but we are trying. Yeah. Then there is another English weekly called Prague Post. You might know it. It's well known because the label has been on the market for I don't know how many years exactly, but like dozens of years, or since the fall of communism, it's going to be 16 years now. But yeah, there are no English media. As I said, there was Radio Free Europe, there was BBC, which was broadcasted in Czech, but that's it. And now the Czech media are left for themselves,
The reason I asked the question is the time that I spent there, I've been struck by how much American music is on the radio, or American music with Czech overdub, or American news. While I was there, the 20 changed over. The American dollar became different, and that was the headline news, or at least on the radio station that my driver was listening to. It struck me as being quite odd.
Yeah, the music. I mean, there's a lot of American influence. The pop culture, the pop music. There are fast food chains. I've done stories about Papa John's Pizza, Domino Pizza going there. There is like the commercial influence is there, but no media influence. That's what I'm trying to brainstorm here to improve the situation. Because as I said, we are in the European Union, the Czech Republic. Last month we are not considered developing countries anymore. We are considered developed now because the World Bank doesn't really contribute to our budget anymore. Doesn't really help us to do projects. So there is no watchdog for the media anymore. And that's what I find really hopeless, because I really think the media are not doing well in terms of ethics.
Are there any voices in the major political parties that are disturbed about this, or is there a kind of a consensus that that's the way things are?
Well, I think the politicians, as if you're going to read one of your handouts about the Czech media, it says that the libel is regarded as a criminal offense. And it's a big discussion now because there are investigative media, which are not the mainstream ones, which are quite small comparing to the bigger ones. So they have much less influence, that's my point, which write stories against politicians. They would accuse them of corruption and so on. Sometimes that's fine, but sometimes some stories are regarded libelous. And it happens quite often that the prime minister sues the medium. He really doesn't sue the reporter, but he would sue the medium, the weekly. It's very common, and it happened in the past that the medium was, the weekly was forced to apologize. The court decided that they have to apologize to the prime minister. And I think there is another ongoing lawsuit, and I think they are even forced to pay some money to the government. So it's a big issue. That it's not. I know that in here, if you write a story against Bush, he wouldn't sue the publication, most likely, I would say. In my country, if you write a story against the prime minister or the president, mainly the prime minister, because the president doesn't have so much power as here. So prime minister is the top person. It's very common he sues media, and he would say openly on public that media are not a reliable source of information, or they lie, and he would really try to lower the quality of the media at all. You know, that's my point. So media, journalists are the least popular people among public if you do surveys, you know, in poll. And also, yeah, they are not paid well as well.
but I mean, are there no voices inside any of the political parties that, for example, would line up with you?
It's not an issue. Sometimes there are senators. We have a lower house and Senate as well as you have. And some senators, like individually, they would raise these voices because they happen to be part of some democratic movement before or whatever. So individual voices, yes, but there is no really a party, especially not a major party, which would consider it a problem. Because, you know, this is about money, and these media, as they are now, they make money. And everybody's happy. And, you know, the politicians, they don't really like media at all. As I said, the prime minister would sue the media quite often. And it's the previous prime minister was even worse. I don't know how, no, Klaus, it was Zeman. I remember, you know, he hated journalists at all, and he would speak about media. He would really say bad things about media, and the public perceive it, you know. Apart from that, yeah.
Was this a smokescreen as well?
What,
was it a smokescreen to go ahead and blame the media for what was happening in daily events? After 89 of the Bell Revolution, a lot of corporations, or some of the state-run corporations became private corporations, but there was a lot of backroom deals. And was that being reported on at the time? Is that why he was accusing the media of being untenable or being unreliable?
I really don't understand exactly what you mean, but...
After, well, the state corporations, the massive state concerns, many of them became privatized.
Exactly.
In 1993, and there was a lot of corruption within those deals. And
that's true, yeah, exactly, mid-1990s.
Right, and the media began to report on that. Is that why they were being accused of being unreliable? In your opinion?
Were they, in other words, was the prime minister trying to cover up what was actually happening?
I see your point now. I really don't think so. I just think it's the culture of politicians. They are not used to believe in media role in the society. They just, if you have to write a really, several times media write about corruption in government or among politicians like almost every week, but nobody gets resigned. Nobody resigns. It just happened recently that the prime minister, well, it happened once, what I remember, that the prime minister resigned because of some series of 2 months lasting series of stories about his big corruption involvement. But otherwise, you write about corruptions on various levels, on local level, on national level, and nobody resigns because the media doesn't have, there is no power. And that's another big difference. So,
is there a problem with members of the media getting the knock on the door in the middle of the night and being carried off to jail like in Uganda or Kenya?
No, I think it's honestly, I don't think really you can compare Eastern Europe to African countries because it's not so harsh, it's not so difficult as there. Yeah. But what I want to say, another thing is important. Under communism, there was a big newspaper. I mean, almost the only one. There was one of few of them called Pravo, like right. And the medium has survived until now. It's called differently a little bit, but it's the only medium in Czech hands and not in hands of a big corporation. And surprising that this medium is doing this a daily with a sort of quite hard, about 200,000 circulation, and it's doing well. It brings good news. It's very left-wing, but it's one of the best newspapers in the country, and it's the former communist paper, which is very ironic, because the rest of media, as I said, they are either in hands of public corporations, big ones, or, as our newspaper, they are owned by top businessmen, like a single businessman who runs several businesses. My newspaper's owner, he's got like oil business, tourism business, he's got brokerage company, and it's very common. It's like a trend now for these top businessmen, which you have several in the country. They all tend to buy newspapers, like weekly newspapers, and they probably want to try to influence the public through these newspapers. I mean, it doesn't happen too much with us, but it's a big trend. And irony is that the only former communist newspaper is now apparently one of the best ones, you know.
Is the public, responsive to the news media? You said that the Prime Minister, says that it's not a reliable source. Does the public generally feel that it is or that it isn't? And if not, where do they go for reliable?
In general, when you talk about public believes what's written in media, but they don't like journalists, just because they think, I don't know actually why, but I mean the poll says they don't like journalists. The most read medium is the daily. It's a tabloid, not tabloid size, but tabloid sensational newspaper, which is called Flash. And it has the high circulation, like all the nation, most people read this Blesk newspaper, which is you get breaking news, but like a certain percentage of them are not right. They are not correct, you know. They just lie. It's a tabloid newspaper, but people trust them. All these masses, all these, you know, the highest percentage of people read this bullshit. So they and usually if the Prime Minister said in this newspaper that journalists in another weekly, the investigative one, they lied about his corruption affair, they would believe that they would believe it's true. They would believe that the journalist lied. It's really difficult to force this public, because most of them read this low quality sensational newspaper. I don't know how is it here. Yeah.
Are there any reliable alternative voices criticizing the media on the internet that people have access to that might bring about change?
Well, like this transition, as I said, the transitions online is one of them, which would publish stories about this guy, for example, which wouldn't appear in other newspapers or other media, for example. But otherwise, I don't really, maybe you can help me if there is any, I don't.
I'm thinking about two other, the first one is called Cloaked, and it's by
It's true.
who was, I think he was a teacher at the Institute of Journalism at the Czech University. And another one, maybe Nedigitální pes.
It's true. It's independent as well.
They are
Yeah.
like independent writers who comment on media, but the public doesn't really have like access. I mean, public has access, but people don't really look at those. It's like for professional audience, maybe I would say. So people don't really get this information.
Exactly. The penetration of internet is much, I don't know the figure now, but it's much lower than in the United States, I would say. So people who don't have access to internet, they rely on dailies, and usually on these sensational dailies.
And even if they have access to internet, I think there's like a big tradition of night TV news that starts at 7:30, and it's a big tradition that every family sits down at 7:30 p.m. and stays watching, all three channels with all three news until 8, and that's like the biggest source of information that they get.
Yeah. I want to point one more thing. You know, sometimes, as I said, we are owned by a private person, the top businessman. Sometimes we would know something negative about the person, but we can't write it. We can't write a negative story. We can sort of, but we can't go into really details and just be really bad, I mean, in the story. So what we do, we talk to our colleagues in Euro, for example, which is another weekly. It's our competition. It has higher circulation. It's in Czech. And we would break the story to them, and they would break it to public. And it works this way. They are owned by another top businessman who owns like insurance company, banks. And if they have a story from his sector of business, they would talk to us, and we break the story. This is what works, and we do it. And it's really, you wouldn't believe how common it is now. And especially, it's good promotion for us because once we break story, the Wire News pick up our news. So it's a good kind of cooperation. It's a shame, but I'm glad that at least it works this way. Yeah. Yeah.
There's a pretty large American community in Prague. Didn't that have any influence, or does this not still have an influence on the press?
I don't think they are too much. The American community is not worried about Czech press, I think.
What are they doing there?
To be honest, there used to be a very large community, and they live there just for fun, I think. They like it there. They enjoyed it. Kind of, yeah. But they disappeared somehow. I think the number...
The crown fell. I mean, the value of the crown is now 23 to the dollar. It was about 180, 85.
It was very high, yeah.
So at that point, it was a lot easier, and for many folks, I guess, the time to live more enjoyably in Prague, where rents were incredibly inexpensive.
That's true.
The value of the dollar time.
But yeah, that's probably the point. But as I said, there is the Prague Post, which is like well-known newspaper for the American and foreign communities, English-speaking community. But they don't break stories. What they do is they summarize Czech media and publish it weekly. And then they have a good supplement of like to-go-out supplement, out and about, getting ideas for restaurants, theaters, and so on. So they don't really do real journalism. They have a good label. It's been there, the mark or the brand, I don't know how to call it. They've been on the market for a long time, but there is no really real influence or proper journalism.
And I have one more question. Radio Free Europe, how long did they remain on the air and broadcast?
Radio Free
Europe, after the fall?
That's what I said. I don't know whether you can help me. Maybe 2 years ago they stopped, or last year.
So they did like 15 years, and they essentially there used to be a propaganda broadcast service sort of, and after communism was over, was done with, I wonder what did they do?
Well, to be honest, I didn't listen to Radio Free Europe, but I listen to BBC every day just because I can't speak about the Radio Free Europe. I think they did just what BBC did, just proper news reporting, getting people speaking, getting straightforward news without advertising, without music. They would just start in the morning and tell you all the news, and did investigative pieces as well. They would do proper interviews. They would spend a lot of time doing real journalism on hardcore topics. That no media does it because it doesn't bring any money, Because not so many people would listen to these hardcore news programs, like the educated people would, but the masses buy these sensational flash. They wouldn't listen to serious news reporting. And, yeah.
7 years ago, I spent some 10 days there, and very few Czechs I met were very well, how do I say it, like, they were very opinionated, and we talked politics big time. I mean, we spent a lot of time talking politics. And it kind of surprised me, the way you're describing the general public as being sort of like not so interested in what's going on. Does the idea of, does the integration within the EU have any effect on this? Because presumably it's supposed to bring good things.
That's what I think. But you probably don't meet the masses. You don't meet the people who live in small towns out of Prague. They are anti-European Union because there is the major part.
Well, those were
okay.
The ones that I met were anti-European Union. But and they were very opinionated. What I'm saying is that those were college students at the time. I'm talking 7 years ago. So probably now, I don't know. They're supposed to be like within people who are forming public opinion.
Yeah, but the political parties are forming public opinion a lot, and that's the role of media again. The right-wing party, there are two, like the major part, the governing party is left-wing Socialist Party right now. The opposition is right-wing. The right-wing is against, they are against the European Union membership. The leader would speak against the European Union a lot, trying to protect the national aspects of our country and so on. And he would speak in media, so and public reads what he says, and they would trust what's written in media. You know what you get? Is it sufficient for you to hear, or what point do you want to make?
Yeah, I guess you know what I would like to know is what happened during the past 7 years, if any change, as they got ready to join in the EU and they joined the EU, and how do you see that play out? Because now they can, as being part of the European Union, they can claim that idea of freedom, not just as okay, you're free as a press, but they can, if they don't see this being demonstrated within the media, they have recourse to within the, you know, as part of the
but as I
European
said,
Union to say that.
I know, but the media covers a lot of politicians who speak against, and that's why you have to realize there is like 20% of electorate, how do you say, these people who vote? Electorate, yeah. So 20% of them support the Communist Party. They are, you know, another, I would say 30% maybe they are anti-European Union. So because politicians speak out in media and they tell them this is right and this is wrong, and they would listen to what they are saying, and media would report on it without really, my impression is that there is no really good reporting on these essential like ideas, I would say, the European Union and so on. It's very tricky.
Can I
Yeah.
comment? It's just like I have 2 points. First, I think the public is, after 16 years of trying to recover from the fall of socialism, the public is tired of like engaging in the discussion, you know, in the public sphere. There was a lot of space for this discussion before the fall, and that's why it kind of had to happen. But since then, people just don't want to talk about politics anymore. They are tired of it, and also the political environment, I think, is not very diverse. There are, when you talk to people, just like maybe it's a particular group that I meet, but my friends or their parents, they usually tell you, well, I'm going to vote, but I don't really know, you know, who I'm going to give my vote to, because there is no one that I want to support. So or I don't want to vote, or I just give it to someone who is against or for communists. That's really the equilibrium.
That's true.
So I think the environment there is just like not welcoming for investigative journalism and discussion. And also the budget is not there for investigation.
Exactly. I mean, that's another issue, but I think it's an issue here as well. But you shouldn't forget that I don't know the percentage, but there is a certain number of journalists who work under communism, and I think it's going to be maybe 40% or even half who still work as a journalist now. I mean, they are not, they don't have to be communists, but I mean they learn something. They work under communism, and they now had opinion departments, for example. Like in this Mladá Fronta, as an example again, it's a mainstream daily newspaper, second most read newspaper, and the head of the opinion department he worked under communism in media. It means he supported the Communist Party. So that speaks for itself, I would say.
Does it mean that he was, does it mean that at that time he was personally ideologically in favor, or he was simply prepared to sell his skills to his employer then, and
no, he
prepared
just
to sell his skills now?
No, he just sold this because I believe that many people, like most of the people, were not really communists, but they had to comply with the rules. Otherwise, they wouldn't work. They wouldn't have job. And I mean, honestly, there are still many journalists, and I really don't get it how they worked under communism. I can't imagine. So that's very difficult. Yeah.
Do you have any sort of national journalism organization?
Yeah, there's a syndicate of journalists, which is based in Prague, but its role, it has more like a labor union role, because, for example, when the German corporations took media over, the newspapers over, they laid off many journalists. And so maybe they would probably like speak on behalf of these journalists. They would help them to survive, to get their rights. They're more like a union kind of thing. If a journalist is sued, which happens quite often because of libel, they would help him at the court or her. It's this role, but they are not really worried about I don't have the feeling that they would really bother about the style, because they don't know what the style is in the United States. That's the problem, you know. There are many who speak English, but there are still like most out of Prague, you know, journalists don't speak English and they don't read foreign media, and their stories, the style is much different. It's very opinionated. You just don't have straightforward news with attributions. You get just an opinion piece, which is published on a news page, and it's very common. You know, you have news pages and opinion pages, and the stories are sometimes very similar. So that's the culture again. You know, the style. That's why I think we should have more Americans or people coming there and going to newsrooms and trying to enforce some rules. Are you laughing? You think it's not true?
Yeah, I think most Americans go over there to make a fortune.
Oh, sorry?
Most Americans go over there now to make a fortune.
They make a fortune.
They go over there and purchase
exactly.
industries and corporations and whatnot at a sum.
Yeah.
But it is not.
Yeah, definitely. It's about money, you know. It's like everything is about money. But what I'm planning to do, for example, when I get back, I really want to do some story on Czech media, critical ones, and publish them on this server or somewhere else online, because the media are not competitive. I mean, they would compete to get citations in other media to be picked up by Wire News, but they are not competitive in terms of like criticizing unethical practices, because they all do it. And if they don't do this unethical thing, they do another one. So they are afraid to complain about these unethical rules, because each of these media, they do something unethical. And if they complain about one newspaper, it could return back to them. And, you know, so you get, I'm trying to make some point here.
How would Americans be greeted if we came over there and suggested to you how you ought to be doing your journalism?
It's just not, it's impossible just to step in newsroom and say, look, you have to do it this way. But there should
would you bring something like this about if we wanted to do something like that? How maybe educators, how
I would start differently at journalism universities. I'm not much familiar with how it goes now, because I never attended any Czech journalism university. But to educate new generation of journalists who would do the job differently and learn these styles. So I would employ like foreign American professors teaching this style, teaching the ethical rules, and so on. What do you think?
Well, what I remember, the style, I mean, the teaching at the journalism faculties, the books are from 80s, you know, 1980s, and I think that tells a lot. There is like, you don't get a book from 2001 to 3 that was published this year. So the style is, it's just like everything is a couple of years older. And I don't know, I studied mass media, I didn't study journalism, so I don't really know how it's with the practical skills. But the teachers are former journalists who were journalists before the fall, and they teach from old books, which doesn't really make.
So you see, that's the point. Because I'm too old now, but she knows. Even the teachers are former communists, not Asians, but they work under communism as professors. How can they teach now?
There is like a new flow of young teachers that are just getting their doctorates, not like PhDs, and they were studying abroad or in England or in France or in the United States. And I think that might be a positive future, but I think they're still in progress.
Well, would your universities accommodate or welcome somebody from the United States coming over?
Oh, definitely.
They would?
I can arrange that.
So, next year off.
Next week.
So the help is coming, hopefully. But yeah, but it could help on one side. On the other hand, as I said, as the media are owned by top businessmen, they still try to. It's difficult to help in this matter, because it's not about money, but as they run 5 businesses, they would write stories about their businesses, which would be very positive. You know, and the reader doesn't know that this, like a regular reader, ordinary person, they don't know that this medium, this business vehicle is owned by this guy who owns this. So if you write something about travel agency called Fisher, there would be a story, and they wouldn't know that the same owner owns this newspaper. And that's the point. We are trying to put a little note. We are always putting a little note. We are the only medium on the Czech market. When we put a little note, when we write about the company which is owned by the same owner as our newspaper, Euro or other newspapers, now Respect was bought by Bakala, which is a coal baron. They don't do it. They just write story about coal industry, and the owner is coal baron in the Czech Republic, and they would never say that is the owner of this newspaper. There's the problem, and I don't know how to solve it.
The success of paper to the Ruder Travel that you were talking about, I mean, can you characterize it in relation to other European newspapers? I mean, is it like Mouthpiece? Is it like The Guardian?
Which newspapers are they?
The successor paper to Ude Pravo?
Oh, Ude Pravo.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm not a media. I can't really say this. I don't follow it so
Okay,
much.
Well,
so.
I mean, but I mean, what kind? I mean, for example, would that paper, in a sustained way, raise questions of media standards and journalistic standards? Is that, you say it does better reporting than the others? Would it raise these issues?
I just want to correct myself. It tends to do a little better reporting. It's not I can't really say that all stories are better and the newspaper is much better, but it seems to be sort of reasonable. But it's still very much like left-wing. The opinion pieces are clearly socialist, a little bit. It's not communist, I can't say, but I don't know, honestly. I would have to. I don't know. I don't talk to these editors. I don't know how they operate. But I just know that it's quite doing well. It's not cash cow as other newspapers, and it's owned by a Czech person who actually happened to be a journalist under communism, which he's good. He's a probably good journalist, but I mean, he still is. He's still influenced. So that's. I don't know whether it would help.
The news shows in the evening that you mentioned that people used to sit around and watch the three major networks. Are they also owned by individuals, or is there a merging of the newspapers and the TV and the radio, like all owned by the same organization?
Yeah, I mean, we have it's not like here. We have main 4 channels, TV channels. Then we have cable, but I don't talk about cable. Like most people watch these 4 channels, which 2 of them are owned by private companies. The most popular one with the highest viewership is owned by a person who owns like tons of businesses. He owns a bank, insurance company. He owns another weekly, our competitor. So it's a kind of businessman who also happens to own media. The another one is also owned by a private company. And then we have 2 public channels, which seems to be a reasonable source of information, but the viewership is much lower than the viewership of the commercial stations.
Who funds the public channels? Are they just funded?
No, they are like fees. You have to pay a fee, every person, every citizen, because all citizens have TV stations now. They have to pay certain money, and this is the major source of money. But also there is some advertising, not much. There is some percentage of that is advertising, but it's not as high as on the commercial TV stations.
Is there anything like a 20/20 or 60 Minutes or those magazine news shows on television where there could be an expose of the newspapers, or would that never happen?
Do you mean like people from newspapers coming on TV and speak?
From the reporters from the TV investigating and reporting on the newspapers.
Oh, they do. I mean, there are, like this Czech television, which is a public channel, they do investigative reporters. But what happens? They do an investigative story. For example, they did it a year ago on one of these lottery companies. They did a good piece, accusing them of some illegal practices. But later on, the TV station apologized to this private company, despite the fact that it was not incorrect, the story was not incorrect. But because they lost a huge source of advertising, it was one of these biggest advertisers. They had this lottery company, they would show their lotteries every time on TV. And once they did this negative story, this advertiser pulled out. And so they apologized later, and the advertiser got in again. So it's not exactly as it should be. I don't know if you know any other example of media. No. So.
Are the 3 main TV stations that people watch in the evening, the news, are they basically just mirroring each other? No one really goes in a new direction. It's all the same story. Or
There are 4, and to be honest, in the Czech in the public television, you get straightforward news. In the commercial television, you get sensational news. I give an example when I lecture another time. There was one day they found a crocodile in some town, so they would put it as a main news that they found this crocodile. While in public TV, the main news would be that the prime minister met some other prime minister from a different country. You know what I mean? So the news style is different, and this commercial, and most people watch this commercial one, this funny kind of things. So you get news which sometimes I wonder how can they put it on TV? These kind of really odd, weird things.
Sounds like our local news.
Yeah, but it's a national one. We don't have this system here is really good because you have many local news channels. So the market is more competitive. It is competitive. I mean, in my country, imagine we have 10 million and we have only 4 stations. So imagine the competitiveness. There is no competition at all. So yeah, they're just competing. Yeah, there is some. These 2 commercial stations are trying to.
With the exception of a brief period in the 20s, a smaller period in the late 60s, is there really been a period in Czech or Czechoslovakian history or cultural history that the media has functioned as anything else besides what, to borrow your technical term earlier, as a purveyors of bullshit? I mean, they've functioned that way for a century.
No, they function under communism. There was 40 years about when they were this way, and before that there was a short period, the First Republic between 1918 and till Hitler took our place over to 1938. There was a time when they were, in that time the journalism was much different from now because there was no technology, but they were very famous journalists who would do the job properly according to their standards. But as I said, it's much different from here. We can't really compare. There was free journalism and better quality, but not really comparable to the technology which is here now. You know what I mean? It's like, I watched The Good Night and Good Luck. Have you seen it all? Good Night. And you see, it was a great movie. It was really good journalism what they did. But wasn't it a bit funny, you know, the way how they did journalism in that time? It was like he put just opinion on TV. I know he did research, but the way how it was structured and everything was much different from what journalists do now. So he was a good journalist, but it's a bit different time. I would like.
They still do that on TV now. If you watch Fox News or some of the networks, some of them still do the opinion kind of reporting. It just
do they?
Not just tonight they'll do it, but it's not something that professional trained journalists welcome here, but the public likes it.
Oh, I see.
And Fox, of course, is owned by a businessman.
Right.
Yeah, I just found it. Yeah, this movie was really interesting. But as I realized, it was really an unusual way of doing journalism, comparing to what's going on now. No, or am I wrong? Yeah.
I think it was unusual at the time, actually. I mean, I wasn't living here then, but I don't think Mauro's style of journalism necessarily reflected normal journalism about sensitive issues at that particular moment in time, which was a very tense, difficult moment in time.
Exactly. Back to your question, I don't think we have such a big journalist, such an affair that the journalists would investigate something and just somebody would resign because of this investigation in the past. Maybe there was, but I'm not aware of it. And it's not, there is not such a big event which would be remembered as it is like the Watergate here or this other events. I don't think we have anything.
My point was kind of like what the question was, it was a leading question. My point is that really the press in Czech Republic and Slovakia prior to has not functioned as a fitness state or a way to sort of check the major powers. It's functioned as a voice of those powers throughout history, or throughout,
exactly, yeah.
Prior to 89 to the Boer Revolution, certainly afterwards as well, and different owners. Perhaps,
exactly,
but,
yeah.
Same message, all's well going your work.
Yeah, you summarized it really well. And that's why it's difficult really to change it right now. Even it's free and democratic, it's really difficult to change the notion, the perception of media. And I don't know what to do.
Compared to, about transitional economies more broadly, around the Czech Republic, there's Poland and Hungary, for example. And my impression of Czech Republic is it's kind of a notch above, perhaps. That's the feel I would get in terms of, say, reporting and journalism in the accuracy and maybe similarities to some extent to the West or something. Do you think that Czech media somehow gets a better grade on the report card as compared to, say, Poland perhaps, or Hungary?
I haven't seen any comparison, but I think it's a kind of comparable. I think the situation is sort of similar in Poland. And I have I mean, if you're interested, I have a friend who is really media analyst, and he's just published, he works for the Open Society Institute. So if you want any information about the context of the whole region, the Open Society Institute, they just done a research check all the media in Poland, Hungary, Czech Republic, and Slovakia, and just publish something which is very valuable, and it answers your question much better. And if you want, really give me your email address, and I'll send you contact for the person who is really who would explain you how it works and what is the difference between the media market in Poland and Hungary and so on. Yeah. I don't know. Do we have some more questions? I just forgotten to say that we, as you probably know, we are the former Czechoslovakia, the Czech Republic. They were split up in 1992, and it was the Czechoslovakia became the Czech Republic and Slovakia. I found it here quite interesting that people still remember the Czechoslovakia, and when I said the Czech Republic, they don't know, so I have to explain them, and I should have said this at the beginning. So yeah, we split up, and it was very peaceful split, and just was a political decision when the politicians wanted to get power, and yeah, there was no really fighting or civil war or anything like what happened in Yugoslavia. Because people here think I'm from Bosnia sometimes when I start speaking. So they would start speaking about the civil war and so on. So I would say, no, that's a different kind of thing. But you are educated audience.
As you were talking about the split, peaceful split between the two parts, and that became a separate country. Where does Slovakia now fit within the European communities, our community? And is it poorer now than it was before?
I mean, it fits. It's a part of European Union. It's there, so it has to meet certain economic standards. But comparing to the Czech Republic, it's still a bit lower. As I talk to many investors who are coming to the Czech Republic, they first always invest, like real estate investors, retail investors, they first start in the Czech Republic, and usually it takes 5 years till they move to Slovakia, just because they say there is the purchasing power is not as high as in the Czech Republic. So they are a bit, I would say maybe 5 years behind, or this, I'm not an economist, but this is what the notion is.
There's no oil there.
Mm-hmm. Sorry?
There's no oil there.
No oil.
Oil? Oh, Slovakia, I'm not sure, but it is oil. Is there any? There might probably not. No. So you wanted to add something, did you?
I was just wondering if the reason why they always started in the Czech Republic is not the infrastructure of the country, because when we were together as Czechoslovakia, like the Czech part was always kind of the center of the country, even if it's not in the center, but it's on the western. If the country is like from west to the east, it's not circular. So the infrastructure is more welcoming for starting the business. There is like every single company that is important or runs big business have the center in Prague. So it's very good to start in Prague probably. I would do that.
Yeah, no, well, because and there's the purchasing power is there. The people can afford to spend money on whatever. While in Slovakia it takes a while. The Slovak crown is like lower comparing to Czech crown. So you get more money for Czech crown, more dollars than, I mean, the other way around than for Slovak.
And the Czech Republic is also like the center for the whole Middle Eastern Europe. Like the companies that have center in Prague usually expand to Poland, Slovakia, Hungary, and even farther to Ukraine. So it's just,
exactly, yeah.
It's easier and easier to start in the Czech Republic where everyone is.
It's a much smaller population than Slovakia.
Yeah, they have 5
It's
million.
not nearly as industrialized. Right.
Yeah.
Although one of the biggest employers is U.S. Steel.
But to be honest, on the other hand, their politicians, some of them are doing really good work there. For example, the health system. They are now transforming the health system there from public to become a little bit more private. In our country, everything is public, everything is free, but the quality is sometimes very low. So they are doing much better job in this healthcare reform than the Czech Republic does. So it depends really pretty much on politicians. So the health minister is good and he's doing good business, but in some cases they are doing better than the Czech Republic. So
you cover tourism for your paper also.
a little bit. I covered a little bit of everything, but my major was real estate and retail. This is my major, but I mean I covered anything. Yeah.
Czech Republic and Prague in particular is really a great tourist destination.
Oh yeah,
Second to Paris or third Rome.
Yeah, I mean, as a tourist destination, Prague is lovely city, historical city, so people go there, and like there's no, I mean, that's okay. There's no like an issue to talk about. I mean, the infrastructure is being repaired. There's the big historical Charles Bridge from the 14th century. They just approved its reconstruction. So there are some funding for it. You know, all the buildings are protected. So developers have having a really hard time to change them into something different. Again, it's an issue. Thank you, Monica. Again, it's an issue because, as I said, the money is flowing there. Developers trying to build there. And again, there is sort of influence trying to transfer these historical buildings into something more modern and make office space or shopping places there. So there are stories, like critical stories about these efforts. But in general, I think the situation is not like, there's nothing really serious to talk about, I would say. Apart from, I will encourage you really to go there because I think it's a lot, especially for Americans who are used to this kind of culture, you know, driving everywhere. If you go to Prague, you just see a little cute, like historic center, and you just don't have to drive anywhere. You can use public transport or walk, and you can walk to anywhere. You get stores, everything. So it could be a lovely experience for you because it's a nice experience for me to be here. And why did you go there? Were you on vacation or?
No, on work.
On work. So.
And studies.
So you were lucky in some way.
Yeah. I will be going there.
Oh, really?
In June for a month. I'm taking a TOEFL program there.
You do?
And then I'm going to come back and finish my program.
TOEFL, you mean English? Oh, really?
So I'm going to get like a certification for teaching English there. Come back this year. I'd like to go back after that, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, you don't need to get ready for that. It's quite modern at this point. Just want to tell you, the Prague is much different from the rest of the Czech Republic, which is a shame. But the Prague is really specific. It's like probably I would compare it to New York in the United States, maybe. I've never been to New York, but my notion is that it's very much different from the rest of the states.
It's a world unto itself.
Yeah. So the Prague is, and I would encourage you to go out of Prague and just travel through. It's very safe. You don't have to be worried. You can even bike through. I met a person in Washington, D.C., American journalist. She just biked through the Czech Republic with her husband, and they were really happy. They enjoyed it. There are beautiful lakes. The countryside is nice. Especially in summer, it's really pleasant weather. It's very warm, but it's not as hot as in here, so you can bike through. Yeah, just encourage you to go out of Prague because you see something less developed, something more exciting for you, I would say even. You still see some like heritage of communism, I would say. Some houses are really dilapidated out of Prague. You still get feeling that the communism was there in the past. So while in Prague you don't see it anymore, I think. I honestly, Prague is really developed now, and the development is going there still. All business people are there. So.
The Global Media Research Center brought Catherine Fritz here, who discussed advertising compared advertising in USA to some other cultures, and talked about globalized standardization of ads, and then also localization of ads too. Do you have any interest in that, or do you know if I don't know what I'm asking here exactly, but I guess I'm just curious about
advertising. Like the advertising industry is, it's a strong sector. It's, a lot of money going on, big tenders for trying to get big companies to advertise. For me as a journalist, it's an issue because most of these advertisers, as I said, they are used to get PR stories while advertising in the paper. Not PR, but they get positive they get stories about their company, and these stories are not negative. So my point is they get a package of advertising plus a story.
That happens here still, like on a smaller scale, definitely. But I think that, advertisers definitely have a huge influence on what stories come about, or what stories go on the front page, or what stories go
exactly.
go towards the front of the paper at least.
Really? About the placement of stories as well? Is it in?
Sure.
Oh, I don't know.
That's not very common, I think, the placement of
You
stories.
don't think NBC is going to do a story against the war, do you? I mean, the General Electric makes far too much money on their war in Iraq. There's all kinds of them.
Oh, you're going a little farther.
Well, not terribly. I mean, they're not that critical.
ABC might not do a story on something going wrong at Disneyland, but they'll do a story on something going wrong with the war.
ABC might.
NBC will too. But she's right that sometimes the smaller newspapers and advertisers do have some sway, and it still happens that newspapers can't run a story about an airplane crash on the same page as an advertisement for an airplane company. Things like that happen. But NBC's going to cover the war.
Well, they'll cover the war, but they're not going to be as investigative as they could.
None of them are.
Fair enough.
You have a question? No? Well,
I think we've talked about it. Yeah.
Oh,
Sorry.
up to you.
No, it's okay.
Well, I think we may be through for this afternoon. So thank you very much indeed, Ms. Breyerova.